Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello, and welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast. This is Sanjana B, the publication's tech reporter. In 2022, the Indian fintech industry's market size stood at $584 billion and is estimated to almost triple in size to reach around $1.5 trillion by 2025. According to data, the payments landscape in India is expected to reach $100 trillion in transaction volume and $50 billion in terms of revenue by 2030. However, the sector is not devoid of regulations and scrutiny. Neha Singh, the co-founder of market intelligence platform Tracxn, and Rishi Batra, the chief operating officer and co-founder of Fintech platform TWID, discuss the future of the fintech industry and growth prospects. Thank you, Neha and Rishi, for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Anjana, for having us.
Pleasure's all ours, Anjana. Thank you very much.
Perhaps we could start by talking about how, the funding winter has slowed down, for the fintech industry right now. And the industry has seen some uptick, but not as much as it did in 2021. So what does the future look like?
So in terms of like if you look at the calendar year of 2024, obviously overall funding has been muted. If you look at it, it has been declining for the last 2 years. So obviously from a peak of 2021, it is down more than 60%. And even as compared to last calendar year, 2023, YTD funding, if you look at the first, nearly 9 months, it was down. And similar is, so this is on the overall, India fintech. And even if you deep dive more into, overall India tech, and even if you deep dive into fintech as a sector, so fintech also saw some decline, YTD. So if you look at the, YTD in the first about 10 months, India saw a funding of about 1.5 billion in across all the fintech startups, which is a decline on a year-on-year basis, from the same period last year. But the good part is that you see some increase in momentum which is happening. So if you look at the latest quarter, which is there, it is actually higher than what it was there Q3 last quarter. So if you look at Q3 2024, it was about 770 million in terms of funding across all the startups in India, which was higher than Q3 of last year. So the good part is that, though the overall funding is slower, which is in line with the global funding slowdown, which we have seen, there is some uptake in terms of the funding which we are seeing in the recent quarter, right? And fintech continues to be one of the top 3 sectors in terms of funding overall across the India tech landscape, in addition to being like retail, right? And the other one. So fintech is like one of the top 3 invested sectors if you see across the landscape as well.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Neha. Rishi, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think fintechs have been the blue dye boys for a lot of VCs and PEs, and it's early in the 2020s and 2021. It's just because of the nature of instrument, right? The nature of instrument was such that was compounding onto various transactions or growth of, let's say, Rishi, Sanjana, or Neha as consumer. If you have a consumer or an apparel business, you can spend X amount. If you are a grocery business, you can spend Y amount. But with fintechs, you can do X plus Y and multiply it by that. So that was the growth was rampant. The growth was massive in 2020s and 2021 for the fintech, and that led to certain amount of emerging trend by the funding winter, which is profitability versus growth at all costs. Various elements that led to correction in fintechs, so that they become fundable again, if I may want to call it. Great to hear from Neha that the momentum is coming back, and fingers crossed for all of us.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Rishi. So what is evident is that RBI and SEBI are sort of keeping a keen eye on a lot of these fintech platforms, right? So if you could shine some light on the kind of regulations that exist within the for the industry, and like how to abide by them. Rishi, do you want to go first?
Yeah, see, I think what it looks like from the outside, that these are, drastic steps that RBI has taken. But believe you me, they are very well researched, well thought out, well spoken to industry experts for a various and a longish period of time. Example, payment aggregator license that brought out took nearly 2 to 3 years, right? Industry had a good 12 to 18 months with extensions to abide by the license and the regulation that was supposed to come in. Uh, so from the outset, which looks like that RBI and SEBI might be, trying to pin fintech down, but these are very well researched, and after giving significant amount of notices to the fintechs to actually abide by it. Now, let's step back and let's look at what all regulations exist, which can be formally put across in two ways. One are the licenses, which I just spoke about, like a payment aggregator or a payment gateway or an account aggregator, right? Which are licenses, or you need to apply for it. If you get it, then you can run those kind of businesses, right? And the second attributes are the acts. DPDP, which is the most talked about now, is about to be implemented very shortly, right? Which got covered in media today as well. Is an act that everyone needs to follow. Yeah. Now, RBI has clear directives from implementing these licenses and acts. First and foremost, being customer protection, customer first, and no shortcuts around it, right? Everyone fall under the gambit of it, which is banks, fintechs, NBFC, so that they can also maintain trails, of the transactions and everything is going as per the order or not. So that's the overall piece. And the way we work in terms of managing the compliance is that compliance is not a single person's or a founder's, or let's say any one guy's responsibility. It's a company wide responsibility, and everyone has to adhere to it, right? The second element is we have a compliance officer, and I think the judgment that he takes, based on the various acts and licenses is paramount. We all have to follow by that. Now, this changes majority of things, which is how data is handled, how products are built, and that's an area that fintechs like us have to start thinking and start abiding. And if we don't take those steps, then I think we know all the path that we have to go through this.
Yeah, no, so actually Rishi kind of summarized a lot of things. I think just to add a couple of things, initially you had this, if you look at it, probably, 5 years back, you had two set of financial institutions. So one were the traditional financial institutions, which were the traditional ones, but they worked, based on the regulation. And on the other hand, you had the fintechs, which were kind of did not fall into any of the regulations, or not much of the regulations, right? So I think recently what is happening is that a lot of the fintechs are also touching regulations at various points, so which I think is actually good for the overall ecosystem, because right now it's not that you have one set of traditional players who are abiding by the regulations, and then the fintechs are working on something which is unregulated or in the gray. Right now, the fintechs are also becoming large players in the whole ecosystem, that they are actually touching regulations at various points in time. And that's why you have said interactions of RBI with all these startups. So I think that's a great thing, that now you have as these players, or as all these ecosystems are becoming large, you have some sort of clarity in terms of regulations, which the RBI and the other organizations are also sort of coming to, which I think will help in that sense, providing more clarity. And as companies sort of scale in this space, and I think the other thing, what I've also heard from a lot of fintech companies, is obviously bodies like RBI is there to regulate, but they are also trying to be fairly receptive about what the companies have to say. So, for instance, there are also opening up forums wherein companies and startups particularly can actually reach out to them in case, they are stuck or they are having some issues. And they are also, sort of open to hearing the issues that the companies are having. So I think that's also a great thing that, it's not just one way communication which is there. They're at least also trying in spirit to be, to also listen to what the companies need.
Okay, okay, got it. So, what are some emerging trends in the sector that either of you can see, and what are some new products that can be developed that don't already exist or that can complement the existing products?
Yeah, sure. So I can actually just talk about some of the broad areas which saw most of the investment in terms of the companies, especially in this quarter. So if you look at Q3 of 2024, the top three sectors within fintech. So one was lending, which is the various form of alternative lending, either to consumers or to businesses. So companies like DMI Finance or Flexi Loans, etc. So that was the top funded node. The second is investment tech. So you have platforms like a Deserve, which is coming up and catering to sort of in the wealth management or the investment management space, right? So that is the second node which saw most activity, and the third, which is more traditional, is the payments. So payments, continue to see sort of more innovation. So though this probably payments has been one of the key sectors, I would say, across the last few years, but it still continues to see sort of new innovation. So, for instance, companies like a Skydo, which is now powering cross-border payments for businesses. So you keep seeing innovation also happening in this sector, right? So these three, I would say, were among the top three sectors within the fintech, which saw activity recently.
Okay, Rishi?
Yeah, let's step back from I think 5 years ago. What Neha just mentioned, it used to be growth at all cost versus profitability now, and that has led to a lot of those innovations, launching of bouquet of services, including value-added services that could aid to more on the profitability side, right? Which typically has led to creating products which can lead not only to revenue but also to profitability, right? Uh, uh, there are various, and I'll speak mostly on the payment side of it. If you look at it, there are various B2B platforms that have started to emerge, which are aiding to payments in some sort of way. For example, TWID, for example, Go Quicks of the world, who are aiding to payments that sector is very emerging. We've actually seen that the expense to run a fintech now, right, in any form and shape, because of compliances, because of customer acquisition cost, has become very, very high, and that is an area that has now been accounted for very dearly in any of the business models and the projections that everyone is making. So these are the three sum up what I have, that launch of various bouquet of services. VAS, this is what the existing players, various new B2B platforms which are innovating, are taking shape and form. And I think the expenses to run fintech have been on the higher side because of compliances, CAC, and that have been accounted for in the revenue and projections and the PAT elements that you guys run.
Okay, got it. So, how do you think, these fintech startups and companies can coexist with non-banking financial companies and banks? Do you think that they can sort of complement each other in a way and, like help each other out? Is there some sort of an understanding that can be developed? Rishi?
Oh, absolutely, right. I mean, one of the underlying undercurrents is that why do you need a fintech to grow the market, right? If you yourself can do it, right? If that's the element, then I think banks and NBFCs should be actually doing it themselves, because growth is directly proportional to the funds, and banks and NBFCs are flush with them. Now, when we look at this ecosystem, uh, how do all the parties coexist? That what is the clear cut value, right? And is this the real problem that we're solving for the banks and NBFCs? If that is the use case, then I think that becomes a very interesting value proposition for them to engage. Now, understand from the perspective, the compliance that you just spoke about uh, is not only impacting fintechs, but it's also impacting these regulated entities. Now, RBI SEBI would be checking them. So their compliance, their regulation process to onboard any fintech or any vendor has become very, very stringent and time consuming. So the mantra for working together is twofold. One is clear cut value, which solves a real problem. Second, patience, because a lot of these engagements will take time to go live.
Yeah, I think just to add to what she probably mentioned. So I think right now you cannot think about these like fintechs or and on the other hand you have NBFCs and banks in isolation right now. I think the line of, with across them is a little bit blurring, right? Like you could see some fintechs actually having being NBFCs. And as well as some fintechs, getting banking license, for instance, through M&A or directly, but you see more and more of this line be blurring, which is also good. So you see from both sides. You see startups or the fintechs trying to get into the more traditional, because as soon as they become big or they have certain products, they need to have the necessary licenses. So that is one. And on the other hand, you also see some of the banks becoming more tech aware, and either tying up with the fintechs through various like partnerships, etc. They are also at least becoming more aware that they have to, that tech is going to be a key component of the way a differentiation for customer offering or for customer acquisition, or just to make the process more efficient, right? So, and they cannot overlook that. So for their, they are also actively working about doing something internally or partnering with some of these emerging companies to facilitate some of the things that they're able to do, or reach out to a wider customer at much more efficient manner. So I think what will probably continue to happen. I think the lines that you see in the more fintechs and the more traditional ones will continue to blur going forward.
Thank you, Neha. And with that, we come to the end of today's episode. Seems like the future of the Indian fintech industry is indeed bright, and that's always great news. Thank you, Neha, and thank you, Rishi, again for joining us for today's episode.
Thanks a lot, Sanjana.
Thank you for having us.